U.S. government just blew $78 billion. Your $78 billion. Harvard Law professor Elizabeth Warren is the chairwoman of the Oversight Panel monitoring the $700 billion bailout fund, the TARP. Her latest report is that the Treasury paid $254 billion for assets worth only $176 billion. Moments ago, Elizabeth Warren went on the record. Professor, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, 75 billion or 78 billion, is that this number?
Yeah, 78 billion.
78 billion, not million.
Billion.
B. That's insane.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, even if we're a million, it'd be a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Okay, everybody who's watching this thinks like, somebody's gone mad. How does this happen that we can overpay for assets to the tune of 78 billion?
Well, it can happen if that's how you plan for it to happen.
That sounds crooked.
No, it's not crooked. It's a different policy. So let me put it this way. We ask the Treasury Department, when they're putting these transactions together, we're doing part of oversight, so we ask them the question, is the taxpayer getting a fair deal? For the money you're pumping into these banks, we're told that you're taking back stock and warrants for the future. Are we getting back something that's worth about the same? So we get a letter back from Secretary Paulson, and he says, yes, these transactions are taking place at par, which just means for every $100 going in, there's a $100 value in stock. That's right. Par, right? So he says at par. That's what the letter says. Sounds like a fair deal. 100 in, 100 back, right, in terms of value. Sounds good to me.
Can't complain about that one.
So we thought about it and thought, maybe we ought to just check, though. So we got a valuation company. We got a couple of professors. We got somebody who had headed up pensions for New York City. And they get together. We take publicly traded information, and we do a valuation analysis. This is a lot of work. This is about 6 weeks of, all day long and nights and weekends, and we have the top experts. They do it 3 different ways to make sure that, there's not something funny in the numbers. And basically, here's what they come up with. They say in those first 10 transactions, they do them transaction by transaction, but in the first 10, if you add them together, here's what happened on average. For every $100 that Treasury put in, we got $66 back. Now, you do that enough times, and that adds up to $78 billion lost.
Right. I mean, well, you explained so well. You're a professor, of course, and it sounds very interesting, and, gee, that's how it happens. As a taxpayer, I'm scandalized. I mean, I can't just sort of recite it like that. You have to practically peel me off the ceiling. Why in the world would we ever overpay for something, especially the tune of $78 billion?
Well, this is the part that I'm a little upset about this undertaking. And here's the deal. It's that there may have been a good reason to pump $78 extra billion into these banks.
But nobody told us.
But that's the deal. You got to come clean about this. If what we're going to do here is we're going to subsidize these banks, especially with that kind of money, you're just going to have to belly up and tell the American people about it.
Why wouldn't they tell it? I mean, why would we overpay for something? What could possibly let your imagination run wild. What could possibly justify not being straight with the American people?
In my view, nothing justifies not being straight with the American people.
You're a Harvard Law professor. You must be able to have a pretty good, your imagination, right? You can come up with stuff. I mean, no, you can come up with nothing.
I'm sorry. You have to tell the truth. That's the deal. We're big people, and besides that, it's our money. If you don't tell the truth, then we can never have the public debate. And that is, do we think the right thing to do here is to subsidize these banks? Is that where our taxpayer dollars ought to be going? I think that's a perfectly reasonable debate to have. Maybe Treasury had something else in mind. That's a fair debate.
But you can't even come up with it. I mean, I've told you to let your imagination run wild. Come up with an excuse.
So one of the stories is they wanted to do these deals fast.
So that's a license to be either incompetent at best, or you won't say it's criminal, but I think when you try to pull a fast one on the American people to the tune of $78 billion, I think there's some fraud involved, but maybe I'm off on that. But okay, so you think that speed would be a legitimate reason to pull a fast one?
Speed in a fast one seems entirely appropriate. No, I don't think it's a legitimate reason.
Any more excuses?
I'm just trying to say we will take on the question of what is the right thing to do with this money, but here's the part that's not right. We can't let a group of really smart people go off in a room and lock the door and make all the decisions about what happens to our economy, and then come back and tell us how big a check to write. It can't work that way.
I don't mind if they're smart, if they're honest.
Well,
I mean, I don't care if they go lock themselves in a room if they get the product, but they're not. But from what you say, this is at best incompetent, at worst just frankly dishonest, and perhaps even criminal.
Well, he said one thing, and the numbers certainly don't bear him out.
If I went out and bought a condominium for $100,000, I would have to fill out all this paperwork. I'd even have to have appraisals. I'd have to have all this sort of, if I was borrowing money from the bank. Whereas there no sort of, appraisal done of these businesses? No. Not at all. Even for $100 grand, and we're talking 78. So we're talking about actually $300 billion.
So let me loop this back around.
Okay.
Because we've been making this argument from the beginning, from the very first report. This is our third report now. We keep making the same point. This has to be about transparency. This has to be about accountability. And you've got to explain what the strategy is here. You've got to tell us what the overall plan is. If you're planning to spend $258 billion, $350 billion, $700 billion, you've got to lay out what the idea is behind it and why that gets us from this point to this point. We've got to be able to hear that as the American people.